Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled How to Ransomware-Proof Your AWS Cloud with the Ultimate Disaster Recovery Strategy. My name is Jennifer Carl, and I'm the Director for the Software and Services Division at SIIA. I am delighted to be joined today by Mike Somerville, Chief Cloud Evangelist and Manager of Systems, University of San Diego, and SIIA member Vitaly Lyaskovsky, Director of Technical Support and Customer Service of N2WS. Before we jump in, if you're not familiar with SIIA, we are the only global association representing the software and digital content industries. We were founded in 1984 and currently have over 750 corporate members. As I said, I represent the Software and Services Division at SIIA, which is home to our ISV community. We also have a number of other divisions within SIIA: education, financial services, media and content, as well as our public policy and IP protection groups. All of our groups serve our members by providing business development and professional development opportunities. This slide represents the Software and Services Division, but a lot of what you see here also applies to the other divisions as well. This is a snapshot of opportunities to get involved in SIIA activities and initiatives, from speaking opportunities, boards, committees, awards programs, market research, and more. As I mentioned, we're a membership organization. All memberships are corporate, allowing all of your employees to take advantage of the benefits SIIA has to offer. If you're interested in learning more about SIIA and how to get involved, my contact details are there at the bottom. And I'd be delighted to welcome you to our network. So just a few housekeeping reminders. The webinar is being recorded, and we will provide everyone with the slides and recording at the conclusion of today's event. All phone lines are on mute. However, we do want to take all of your questions, so please use the chat box on the bottom left of your screen to ask questions at any point throughout the presentation. We'll be sure to answer those questions that we have time for, and if we do not get to your question for any reason, we'll be sure to send you a response following the conclusion of the webinar. We do have a very short survey at the end. Please help us provide an even better experience by giving us your feedback. Now for why we're here today, to discuss how to ransomware-proof your AWS cloud with the ultimate strategy. I would like to welcome our experts, Vitaly Lyaskovsky, Director of Technical Support at N2WS. Vitaly is a cloud and disaster recovery expert, bringing over 20 years of experience assisting clients in protecting their mission-critical data, addressing a wide range of customer use cases. His previous companies include Intel, FilesX, and IBM. Mike Somerville, Chief Cloud Evangelist and Manager of Systems Support at the University of San Diego. Mike is responsible for managing campus-wide, always available IT systems and services at the University of San Diego. He brings over 20 years of experience in leading the adoption of cloud services and providing innovative and cost-effective solutions, allowing for 100% uptime all the time for critical systems and services. Vitaly, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Happy to be here. Before we move on to the technical part of this presentation, please take the next 15-20 seconds to answer this short survey. We'd like to learn a little bit more about you. Do you use public cloud? And if you do, which one? So please take the survey, and we'll see the results shortly. Okay, so I don't know if you see it, but it seems that the majority of attendees, 84%, are actually using AWS. This presentation is going to be very useful for you. which is a good thing. So the topic of ransomware is the fastest growing type of cybercrime due to its low risk, high reward structure. It projects to cost over $20 billion in 2021, and just 4 years ago the number was $325 million. So as you can see, it's really growing fast. Ransomware is not the same as it used to be, not just the cost of it going up, but it's also become much more sophisticated and intelligent. It's also becoming much easier to perform ransomware attacks thanks to basically two relatively new technologies. One is the cryptocurrency, which allows criminals to benefit from your ransom, from your payment, without being tracked. And the second one is ironically public cloud. And the second one is, I hope you can hear me better now. Second one is public cloud, which is allowing anyone basically to launch an attack against anyone using public resources. Previously, before public cloud, criminals would have to actually set up a very large IT organization before they could attack a big target, but nowadays they can just scale their operations thanks to public cloud. One example is of such large-scale attack is WannaCry, which affected many organizations in over 150 countries and cost the global economy over $7 billion. Here are some interesting statistics about ransomware, but please keep in mind that most of ransomware attacks nowadays are still not being reported, so the actual numbers may be quite higher. But most important type of statistics that you can see here is, first of all, the high cost of recovery, over $500,000 on average, 23 days for the recovery to take place, and about half the organizations are being attacked more than once. That is just very troubling. Now, ironically, the biggest cost of ransomware is not the ransom itself. It is a common misconception that ransom is the biggest cost, but in fact, the damage to your data, cost of restoration of host systems and data, loss of productivity due to downtime, cost of forensic investigation, and of course, damage to your reputation, which can cost you many times more than the attack itself over a long period of time. Also, I would like to mention that ransomware, because it requires the ability to read your data, it's not necessarily just encrypting your data. It may also harvest your data and send it elsewhere, and the attackers may in the future use the harvested data against you or your users. Yeah, here's a very unfortunate example of what can happen after a ransomware attack. CodeSpaces was a code hosting and software collaboration platform, and they suffered the ultimate cloud nightmare. Hackers managed to gain access to their Amazon account and took control of it. Of course, CodeSpaces did have backups, but unfortunately they did not have cross-account backups. So the attackers gained access both to production data and backups. CodeSpaces went out of business 12 hours after the attack, in part because of the high ransom demand, in part because of the ongoing credibility of the company was damaged, and they simply could not justify staying in business. So this is a very important lesson to learn, that it's not just the ransom, not just the downtime, but also the trust of your clients, which will make or break the company. It is impossible to acknowledge all of the rampant data breaches that took place in the last couple of years, but you can see some of the examples in this slide, some of the more famous ones. Recent attacks shutting down entire cities such as Baltimore and 2 Florida cities with huge payout demands mean that a once private corporate problem has gone public. These attacks on states and on the city governments has given the public the opportunity to examine the problems associated with ransomware, while corporations previously were not obligated to disclose such attacks, and they preferred to handle them behind closed doors. The main lesson to take from all of these attacks is that all of them were preventable, completely preventable, and in the event of the attack, you must have a strong backup solution, including offsite backups that are totally air-gapped, so that if ransomware hits, it cannot hit both data and backups. It is simply unacceptable to not have offline backup capabilities in this day and age. So the million-dollar question, or sometimes more, to pay or not to pay. Currently, nowadays, only a small number of organizations do pay the ransom because they prefer to use backups to recover the data. They don't need to decrypt the data, they just recover it. Also, it's important to understand that even if you pay, you are absolutely not guaranteed successful recovery, successful decryption, simply because the criminals have absolutely no incentive to help you recover your data once they receive the backup, once they receive the payments. They just risk additional exposure, and they would like to avoid it. So they will either cut the communication, or even if they send you a decryption key, the decryption key may not function as expected, and you will blame yourself that you're doing something wrong, but in fact, it's just not going to help you. And in fact, in many ransomware scenarios, your data is being destroyed, not encrypted. So that's why the recovery is simply impossible, no matter how much you pay. Mike, I'm giving you the stage.
Awesome. Great. Hey, Vitaly, thank you so much. Yeah, it's an honor to be here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about just sort of backup maybe a little bit in general, a little bit about AWS, and then maybe specifically about what we do at N2WS. But first, there is another poll, which is pretty awesome. Do you have a backup or DR strategy in the cloud? For everyone to take that. It'll be interesting. It was interesting to see the results of the previous one. I don't know if we need to send that screenshot to AWS. I think they'd be quite pleased with the number of people that have AWS. But this one is pretty interesting too. Actually, did you go back on a couple of your slides while people are taking the poll? The WannaCry virus, admittedly, the University of San Diego got hit with that in the sense that we received reports from people that they couldn't get to their files, and there was this ransom thing. The good news is that we didn't have to pay, and none of the files, and the files that we had currently were bad, and they were destroyed, and so we restored from backup. However, I would submit that your data there saying the average amount of time for 23 days to get the files back is fairly accurate in the sense that it was 23 days in total. We didn't work 24/7, 365, and so there were some weekends in the middle. And it wasn't because it took us, 8 hours a day for a whole week for a while. It was because of the verification and the human interaction and that sort of thing, saying, okay, was this really the file that? And additionally, it was the first time we got hit with a ransomware thing. So of course, maybe if we had been in the ransomware business and we had done this before, then it would be really easy. But Interesting. So anyway, so yeah, so this is a really, it's sort of cool actually that there's a bunch of people on here that are already using N2WS. So yeah, that's interesting. Anyway, if you want to go on to the next slide, yeah. So one of the things that we started doing here at USD a while ago is looking at the cloud, like I would submit a lot of you have. And initially, when we started looking at it, AWS's stance was like, look, we're going to be really reliable, but we're also giving you this free load balancer and giving you the ability to buy 2 of everything of ours and put it behind this load balancer because we pretty much guarantee you that it will go down and there will be this, the chaos monkey will be out there and you can use that to destroy everything, design everything to basically be unavailable, right? And so therefore, it was kind of well known, I think, that, hey, the cloud, it's going to go away, so you need to back it up. But I would submit lately, I've actually heard colleagues say, well, we don't really back it up the way we did on premise in the cloud because it just, it just never goes away. It's just so darn reliable now. And so that sort of made me raise my eyebrows. But nonetheless, the reality is that, there's definitely going to be some failures, right? I mean, hard drive manufacturers, whether it's solid state or whatever, they're in the business of selling more gear. And so, so it's probably more common than is going to happen. Now, does that mean that our data is going to be lost? No, there's that 11 nines, But the point is that it's not necessarily am I going to lose it from the cloud provider. Is it going to get damaged by ransomware, the point of this whole discussion, as well as is it going to be damaged potentially by a human unnecessarily. So if we hop to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit more specifically about AWS as it relates to the shared responsibility model. And the cool part really is that, on day one when you sign up with AWS, they say, okay, look, here are the boundaries. Here's how our relationship will work. We're going to provide you with these things, and you're going to do this stuff. And we will take care of the data center and all of this, the HVAC, everything. We will also provide you with, in my opinion at least, excellent support. And obviously all you have to do is Google, quite frankly, that bolded text up there, AWS Shared Responsibility Model. You'll get a URL and you'll be able to read that. But the point is that, it's up to you to make sure your data is backed up. And I guess it almost sounds sort of odd making that statement, right? But the point is that it is. And so that's a given. So if we go on to the next slide, how can it happen, right? And okay, we talked a little bit about the potential drive failures. There's compliance and data security that can occur. You can lose an entire availability zone, of course. You could lose an entire region, but the sun could hit the earth. Okay, sure, right? And yes, you can lose, you do cross region. I get it. But the bottom line is I think, specifically to what we're talking about now, there's going to be some human error that may or may not be from malicious intent, but specifically to ransomware. And I don't know if you really caught it when Vitaly was talking about, the other ways we get it. It's not just like, well, Mike, I'm smart enough to not click on these silly links that I get in my inbox. I know what's going to cause ransomware. Well, it's going to get to the point, and it almost is really, where there will be emails that get in your inbox that you don't even have to do anything with. You just view it, and somehow that causes it, that. Now, I'm not trying to paint doom and gloom. Don't, yes, check email again today. It's important. But the point is that it's going to get more sophisticated, and so I don't know if it's not if but when, right? But look, the ransomware is out there, and this is the point to proactively sort of prevent it. So as we move forward, let's talk a little bit more about the risks and how to reduce those. And so again, Vitaly, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your opinion on that?
Thank you, Mike. So about reducing the risk. First of all, we recommend to prevent ransomware from the onset with security phishing education. Stress the importance of examining links and attachments to make sure that they are from a reliable source. Warn your staff about the dangers of giving out company or personal information in response to an email, letter, or phone call, no matter how official they may look or sound. We recommend bringing in an outside firm to conduct annual training for all of your employees consider using applications that provide you customized security tests that can be created, that your employees can take them periodically and hopefully pass them.
Yeah, actually, let me just interject, Vitaly. Actually, we do that here at the University of San Diego because, again, obviously we're a learning and teaching organization. We have classrooms and we do it that way. But we also make sure that we teach our staff and students, of course, how to look at an email and say, hey, is this correct or is it not? And we do that in various ways. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, any way to prevent it. So that's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Also, you must be proactive in patching your operational systems, applications, and devices. You should deploy early threat detection systems and run frequent security scans, which are your second line of defense. Mike, back to you.
Yeah, thanks. So, one of the sort of in air quotes there, you may have seen it, is the ransom proofing of your cloud, right? And in the introduction, and thank you, Jennifer, by the way, she mentioned, near 100% uptime, right? And a lot of times we call it 100% uptime and disaster avoidance here at the University of San Diego. Because I can tell you right now that in IT, yes, you could argue, and certainly contractually with our vendors, we talk about 4 nines and 5 nines and that sort of thing, and yes, that is what the agreement will be. But our students don't care about nines. It's either available or it's not. It's a very binary discussion. And so to become 100% available, then we proactively need to realize that, hey, we're going to lose this data. It can come from ransomware, potentially. And so at the end of the day, I love this one, which is like, how do you do this? Well, you back up, you back up, you back up. And then you test, right? And so on to the next slide, again, okay, so that's what the user expects, but then there are these backup terms. And I think we've all, heard of the recovery time objective and the recovery point objective. The recovery time objective, again, for our customers is basically they don't want to feel it. So therefore, it's 1 over infinity amount of time. It should happen basically right now. The recovery point objective is I should be able to have a file that has everything in it as I remember it the last time. There should be nothing like, oh, wait, where's that stuff I lost? And then for the other ones, it's very IT-centric. In fact, Vitaly and I were talking about that. And so, Vitaly, give me your definition of crash consistent and app consistent, because I think that was actually the most accurate.
Yeah, sure, Mike. So basically, crash consistent backup is a backup that is usually done through snapshots. And in the case of crash consistent backup, the protected application has no idea that it's actually being backed up. And in case of application consistent backup, the application is being aware that it's being backed up and it's entering some kind of backup mode. Both crash consistent and application consistent backups are equally good at recovery, actually. They don't matter as much as your success rate goes. Both give you 100% recovery rate nowadays with modern applications. However, when you recover from a crash consistent backup, basically the application and the operational system thinks that it's coming back from power outage because it looks like somebody just turned off the electricity at one point and you're coming back from an outage. With application consistent backup, that doesn't happen. So the main trade-off between the two types of backup is that when you perform crash consistent backup, the backup itself takes less time, but during recovery, you may need to, of course it's always happening automatically, the application may need to roll back a few transactions and then recommit them to database. So it may take a few seconds more. In the case of application consistent backup, the backup itself takes a little bit longer, but during recovery, you don't need to spend those extra seconds rolling back transactions and recommitting them. So that's a trade-off that every organization needs to decide for itself what it really prefers to save time during backup and resources, of course, because it also can be a very IO-intensive operation. Or do you want to spend a few extra seconds or maybe even a minute during recovery? Back to you, Mike.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, and then the offsite backup, obviously, everyone I think knows the name Iron Mountain, right? And credit to them for being a well-respected solution to put our tapes in, as well as other things, destroying data as well, actually, I guess. Paper destruction, that sort of thing. But the nice thing about offsite backup, especially as it relates to the cloud, is it's no longer a discussion of like how is this physically going to move my data from point A to point B. It's really a right mouse click, right? And so if we go on to the next slide, I'm not going to sit here and tell you about the AWS model. I think most of us know about AWS, again, especially based on the initial survey of the number of folks. But for those that don't, as you might guess, they have global presence. But to this point of global presence, one could argue, okay, well, how am I going to select the best region and that sort of thing? And depending upon your application, you say, okay, well, I'm going to select the data center that's the closest to us, right? Because that will serve the user the best. They will have the best experience. It'll have the least latency, and it will provide arguably maybe the best compliance. So for example, here we are, University of San Diego. We should choose Northern California as our region, right? Well, the price of storing data actually in Northern California is more expensive than Oregon. And additionally, when we store our S3 backups, or when we convert, say, an EBS backup to S3, we'll talk a little bit about how actually AWS does that specifically. But when we do that, the cheapest place to house that S3 data is in Virginia. And so that's another place where we can physically separate it while still keeping it still in the United States. So if we go on to the next one, and then the benefits of backup and restore, obviously in AWS, you can all read this, but I can tell you that the speed with which you can back up and recover has been a real benefit for us, as well as the ease. I would submit that over my career, like many of you probably, once you get the backup system in place, it's actually quite easy to continuously back it up once you get it all configured. And I know that that's not a trivial thing in the enterprise. But once that is done, it's actually pretty easy to keep it going. Now, the first time you need to do a restore, there's potential panic. But the nice thing about what I've discovered, at least, from the solutions that we have in AWS, specifically to backup and restore, is that it's very easy to sort of test that restore. And so that's nice. And so therefore, to the scalability sort of bullet point there, it really allows us to be able to start small, test it, get real comfortable with it so that the next restore we have a lot of confidence in, as well as I can sit here and say, yes, if we get hit with ransomware, it certainly won't be a disaster. There will be no recovery in a disaster. It will be a disappointment. If you still want to use the same letters, it might be called DR, but it'll be a disappointment. It won't be a disaster. So, just curious, if we move on, actually, and I think that there's so I'm just curious how fast you think that you can recover from a ransomware attack. And again, this question is not necessarily based on, because I have this epic solution and I'm already in the cloud. It could be, actually, Mike, I store everything on note cards, and I'm able to walk across campus and get those note cards from a different filing cabinet. But I think most of us, it's sort of a reasonable question to say, okay, well, what's a reasonable amount of time that I would tell my IT friends, not necessarily what I might tell an auditor that they might want to hear, but it's like, no, what's it really going to take? Because there's going to be some communication time, and I hope you consider that when you think about this, because it's not just, okay, what's it going to take for me and my systems guys to do this? Okay, all right, so about 17 hours later, we'll really have our arms around this. But what is it going to take afterwards, too, to potentially educate that department that has now done this the third time? So anyway, and so I like the answer of never partial damage may remain. That's actually, you know what? If I were to re-answer that question, maybe I should have chosen that one based on my little sort of diatribe that I just went through there. So anyway, back to Vitaly. I'd like to obviously allow you to talk about the wonderful company.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. So a little bit about our company. Two important takeaways. Our product is the top reviewed and rated AWS Marketplace solution for storage and backup, not just for backup, but the entire storage category. And it's based on cloud-native technologies, unlike some of the competitions that offers you backup protection in the cloud, but it's actually bringing in all the backup technologies into the cloud instead of using native AWS snapshots. In this slide, you can clearly see the added value that AWS can provide you. On the left side, we see the building blocks that AWS gives you, and on the right side, you can see what AWS can give you on top of it. Very important is VPC backup. It's a relatively new feature that was requested by many customers, and I think it's important to understand that when you're talking about RTO that you mentioned before, it's not just about restoring your data, because if you did restore your data but your customers cannot access it because your network is down, then your data isn't really restored just yet. It's only restored when the access to it is restored as well. So it's very important to be able to recover both your data and your network, and that's what VPC backup allows you to do on AWS. Another important feature is ability to archive to lower cost, long-term backup storage. So you can still protect your backups for as many years as your industry or government regulations require, but you don't have to pay the full price of regular AWS snapshots. File-level recovery. It's very useful when you just need to recover that one file, one report that your boss needs. It will only take a few seconds, and you got it. Of course, extensive auditing, reporting abilities allow you to sleep well at night knowing that your backups are up to date, that you are well protected. It's very important. Gives you peace of mind. And as we mentioned before, ability to perform application-consistent backups, which native AWS snapshots by default do not perform. And perhaps the most important feature is a very simple, very intuitive user interface that once you try it, you just can't stop using it. Basically, it's very easy. You just know what to do. I highly recommend everyone just try it. You'll see what I'm talking about. Here you can see example of some of our customers and business partners. Some very impressive names, but believe me, that's just a very small part of the alphabet of our customers. What AWS gives you is basically a giant recovery button, although ironically we don't have that. It's pretty small in our user interface because that's how user interface is built. What it allows you to do, it allows you to have policies and schedules that are very flexible, that you can protect every resource in your organization exactly to your specification. Also, you can have cross-region and cross-account disaster recovery, and as we mentioned before, VPC capture and cloning, which allows you to protect not just your data, but the network around it. Here is a slide that shows you, for example, cross-region disaster recovery. In this slide, we perform replication between two different regions, but within the same account. So what it does, it protects you against region failure, but it doesn't protect you against your account being compromised. In the next slide, we can see the opposite. The data is being replicated in the same region, but between two accounts. So you're not protected against region failure, but you are protected against your account being compromised. And finally, the best possible scenario, replication that is both cross-region and cross-account. It protects you from both scenarios, and I think it's very important to mention, considering the topic of today's webinar, that our replication is not like your traditional replication. Traditional replication replicates your data to to another location in hopes of providing you zero-time RTO. If your main site goes down, you just start using your backup site. Unfortunately, in case of ransomware, such traditional replication simply replicates ransomware to your backup location, and now your RTO becomes infinite. So the big advantage of N2WS that it's not replicating your data, it's replicating your backup. So you're not overwriting your data with ransomware. Some of the cost-saving features that you can have with our product is the ability to archive your AWS snapshots into long-term low-cost storage, and also very recent addition, ability to schedule your instances. You don't have to keep all of your instances up and running 24/7. You can save a lot of money on your AWS monthly bill if you create schedule for each instance, and they will automatically be started and stopped at specified times, saving you thousands and thousands of dollars. Mike, back to you.
Absolutely, thanks. So again, so what did USD do, right? And so as you can see here, just sort of a summary of us as an organization. We have around 8,900 students in total, and so that's undergrads, graduate students, law students, PhDs. And specifically to this sort of case study, about 500 servers that involve Linux and Windows VMs. They're virtualized in our Converge infrastructure, which we adopted several years ago. And we have an ongoing migration. Right now we have 4 data centers on campus. We have one additional one in Phoenix as part of our disaster avoidance plan. And as you can see there too, we also have 2 main ERP systems. So we have an ERP system like any other enterprise would have for HR and financials and that sort of thing, and that's Oracle E-Business Suite. And then we have the Ellucian Banner system for our student system. And so as far as right now, for the most part, we're still running the majority of our systems on premise, with our goal and our scaling goal being 100% in the cloud. And so what I mean by that is, for example, right now, I say that we are 100% virtualized, meaning everything that we should virtualize, we have virtualized. There are instances where we have things installed on bare metal because that is the right thing to do. And there's maybe, let's say, a dozen of those systems. There will be systems that we cannot put in the cloud for various reasons. One of those is our point-of-sale system, simply because of the way that it is designed, as well as the way that we do PCI compliance, Sec D if you care, here on premise. And so just a little bit about USD and also our journey to the cloud. So one could argue that we're fairly new or early on in our journey as far as moving our workloads up there. Now we've been using the cloud. We've been using AWS specifically since about 2009. We actually started using Google for Gmail in 2007, so it's not like we haven't been using cloud services for. And Route 53 was a huge success for us, actually. We went from spending about $60,000, believe it or not, for on-prem DNS appliances, and using Route 53, I think my bill is about $18 a month. So kudos to AWS. But if we want, so go on to the next slide, and I'll talk a little bit more about the recoverability, because again, as we mentioned, the ransomware, they're going to continue to get better at it, right? And while there's obviously filters we have in place for things coming in that will also get better at detecting it, the frequent backups and with minimal manual interference, I mean, that's going to be really, really key. And again, for minimal RTO, meaning that we need to essentially exceed the expectations of our customers, that's really where we're focused at. And then so moving forward, I'll go with the basic DR strategy, let's say, so for using N2WS. So what we have is we have 2 accounts, and one of them is prod, and that one is in an account in AWS that has dual redundant point-to-point VPN connections to campus. And so effectively that was our first sort of infrastructure as a service connection to AWS. And we use that, and if anyone else here is in higher ed, we use the scenic peering connection for that. As well as over the public internet for backup, as most people do. California and Oregon for our 2 regions, and we basically DR, if you will, from California to Oregon, and then anything that's running in Oregon, we DR that down to California. And then I've also started using Ohio as another one, which gives us, and it was interesting actually when Vitaly and I were talking about this initially when they gave the example of code spaces. I said, well, we're going to still be in business no matter what happens really at USD. We're a university, we're an institution, so regardless of what happens, so now we're going to start doing cross-account backups. So thanks for that important safety tip. But again, the goal of 100% to the cloud. So we can go on to the next slide, and then so specifically to the advantages of N2WS. Interestingly enough, I mean, here I am talking about N2WS, and we've been engaged with them as a customer now for probably about, let's say, 3 months or so, maybe 4. I found out about N2WS about 3 years ago. Went through the demo and everything, and at that time I thought, you guys are great. This is going to be a great solution for us when I need it. Because at the time we only had like 3 or 4 instances up there, and then we went to a few. And then we dialed back a little bit, and then we did more converged infrastructure on premise. And then we said, okay, well, let's get serious. Let's really get up into the cloud. And I knew, like most of us know in enterprise IT, well, anything I have to do, I have to back up, right? So I said, this is great. This is going to be a solution. And so I reached out, and sure enough, I mean, it was even easier, right? Like most things in AWS, I was able to go to the marketplace, and while many will offer a trial, their 30-day trial is, I mean, again, it's very easy to do a lot of things in the cloud, but N2WS is truly stellar. I mean, I'm not just saying this. So it's very cost effective. The support is excellent. And if you, maybe no one knows me on this call, but if you know anything about me, you know that I'm fairly high maintenance when it comes to support. And their customer support is exceptional, and I really, really am happy to say that. Not only do they sort of help me out in like best practices, but they're very willing to get on the phone and walk through, say, like a Zoom session or something and say, okay, well, here's a better practice, Mike. Here's what you should probably do with this. Here's what we should do 30 days from now in tuning. And so I really appreciate that. And then, and if you don't know, so Vitaly actually runs that support team. So you can blame him for my wild success. And so I'll just turn it back to him, actually. He can go for the advantages of the end to downtime, my friend.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I'm blushing over here.
Good.
Yeah. So now we're coming to a very important part of this presentation is the new kind of problem that ransomware presents to modern organizations is that it's becoming more and more sophisticated and intelligent, and nowadays it's not just trying to turn off your antivirus or your firewall, it's also starting to target your backup agents. So that's basically happening because not just us understanding that backup is the only solution to ransomware, but ransomware providers are also understanding that, and they're not willing to waste their time attacking an organization that is well protected and will choose to restore the data instead of paying. So that's why they're now targeting backup agents, and it's a huge problem on the market, but there is a solution. So how can N2WS protect you from an intelligent modern ransomware that is targeting backup agents before spreading itself? First of all, even if your N2WS server is somehow compromised, which believe me is extremely hard to do, you can set up a new N2WS server and use metadata from the old one. The metadata is also constantly being backed up in AWS, so you're protecting your metadata together with the backups. And no matter what happens to N2WS server itself, you can also always restore backups using either EC2 console in AWS for native snapshots, or you can use Vim backup and restore for the archived long-term low-cost backups, which are used in S3. Also, backups being AWS native backups, they're not kept on any Windows or Linux machine or network share. So an attacker simply doesn't have access to them. No matter what they do, there is no attack vector for them to destroy your backups. They have no access to them. Also, backups can continue to run even if attacker does turn off the AWS backup agent on your protected instance. It doesn't matter. The backup will still run. It will simply be crash consistent instead of application consistent. As we mentioned before, both are 100% recovery success. So all it's going to cost you is a few more seconds on the recovery end. So even without the active agent, the backups are 100% fully restorable. Some key takeaways for today's session. Cloud environments, and not just them, need a reliable, flexible, and automated solution to manage backups. Of course, AWS Backup and Recovery provides an easy, scalable, and efficient way to manage your snapshot-based backups. And the best, maybe the only true ammo to disrupt ransomware is to take regular backups and have a DR plan in place. Please feel free to trial our solution. You can have 30-day fully functioning trial. If you have any questions that go beyond questions that we're going to answer now during the webinar, please send them to info@n2ws.com. Please also take the 1 minute to fill our survey at the end, and stay tuned for the second part of the webinar on this topic, during which we will present a live ransomware infection of AWS instance, and we will show you how to safely and efficiently restore it to the point before the ransomware hits you.
Vitaly and Mike, thank you so much for just walking us through everything with a ransomware attack and how we can all protect ourselves better. I think you've given us a lot of great tools and information we can look into further moving from here. So a couple of questions have come in, and I'd like an opportunity to address them and collaboratively address them, or you can switch on or off. But the first question was, I work for a federal institution, and it's 2 parts. Do you support GovCloud? And the second part is, how can I be sure that you don't have access to our data?
Okay, yes. So that's a very important part of why AWS is such a great solution for many organizations that are bothered by who has access to their data. Is AWS has no access to your data. All your snapshots, being native AWS snapshots, they are kept in your account. That can be your regular production account, that can be your backup account, but in no case any data or metadata of your backup is delivered outside of your organization. And of course, we do support GovCloud, both regions, fully supporting, fully functioning. You can even perform replication between them. So fully functional in GovCloud, and don't worry, your data is not going anywhere, not even to us.
Thank you. So the next question that came in, and it was from early on in the presentation, Deborah had asked, what are cross-account backups?
Yeah, so there is a slide earlier, but I don't mind repeating it. It's basically a situation where you replicate between 2 accounts. Usually both of them belong to your organization. So you have production account and you have backup account. So you can take your native AWS snapshot in the production account and then copy it to your backup account. In this situation, even if your production account is being compromised, if somebody hacks into it and deletes both your data and backup, you can still restore from your backup account. That's it.
So thank you. I have a question coming from the AU, and it says, we have a specific use case in AU that's only one region, and the data can't leave the AU. Does your system work in the AU and meet data requirements of the AU?
Yes, of course. AWS works just fine in Australia. And as I've mentioned before, at no point is your data delivered to AWS. So any regulations that you may be worried about, don't be worried about, because the data is always kept within only your AWS accounts. It's not leaving any of your accounts, never.
Okay. So this next question is for my organization. It's necessary to take snapshots every 5 minutes during business hours. Does that affect our AWS storage costs?
Well, if you perform frequent backups, then of course that's going to have additional cost compared to, for example, daily backups or even hourly ones. 5 minutes, that's a bit extreme, but it's absolutely possible. And since AWS native snapshots are both incremental on a block level, and also they use the duplication, they're going to be very cost efficient. And we do have customers that protect data every 5, 10, 15 minutes, and they're very happy with the total cost of that operation.
So our next question is, how do you test, restore critical systems and keep them isolated from live network?
Well, that can be done very easily. You can either restore, for example, into different accounts, and then all the communication between that account, of course, it will not have anything in common with your production account, so that's separate setup. Or even within the same AWS account, you can simply restore into different VPC and block out access outside of the VPC, so the restored systems cannot connect outside and perhaps show up with duplicates on your network.
I would recommend actually the 2-account scenario.
It's easier.
Alleviates any collision.
So what are some common mistakes you see organizations making with backup?
Not doing them.
Well, yeah, that's number one mistake. Not having enough of them, not having them for all of their resources. Often organizations simply don't know that they are not protecting all of the resources. And also, AWS can help you here because we do provide the report for all of your protected instances in the account and unprotected instances. So if you missed something, you can see the exact resources that you're not backing up. And sometimes that's a decision that the organization makes. Maybe they don't need to protect everything. But at least they know what's protected and what's not, and they can make an informed decision.
How long does configuration of the N2WS solution take, and how quickly could one restore their data with your solution?
Mike, from your experience?
Honestly, the configuration of it. So for the most part, it takes about the same amount of time as spinning up a Windows instance and logging in. And the reason I say that is because anyone who's done that in EC2 knows that to spin up a Linux instance and log in is pretty much instantaneous. With Windows, you need to wait until you can right mouse click, get Windows password. So there's that delay. So think of it as basically about that. So I'm going to say, and then of course you need to go into the marketplace and buy it. So I mean, if you've got 15 minutes, you can set this up.
And the recovery-wise?
The recovery, I'm trying to think of how long it takes. I mean, the short answer is not long. I don't know if I've timed it. I guess probably like 10 or so minutes. I mean, I'm being realistic. I mean, you sit down and you say, okay, which one of these do I want, and what time do I want it from? So I mean, it is. It's not like 4 seconds or something, but I mean. I suppose if you were, trying to beat your buddy doing it, if you were gaming with him, then yeah, you could do it. But the reality is that there's no way you're going to say, oh my God, this solution takes so much longer than all the. I mean, it is very fast compared to any other solution I've used. Let's just say that.
So Mike, we've had a question specifically for you. How did you back up before N2WS, and what made you think you needed a solution?
I assume they're meaning specifically my stuff in the cloud, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So the short answer is that we use the snapshot that is available to everybody for free in AWS of EBS volumes. Now, there also is the scheduling that you can use, right, in AWS. And in fact, we did a pilot, if you will, in the sense that I said, hey guys, I'm going to use N2WS, and one of my systems architects, I said, okay, well, I'll tell you what, you trial run this snapshot thing that Amazon has. And for the most part, you can set them both up in about the same amount of time. But having to manually manage the snapshots from AWS, I mean, that after day one, that becomes very annoying. And of course, you can't drill down into the snapshot. So the short answer is we were doing it manually. And just to be totally transparent, right? I mean, I'm sure several people have done this too. When I was testing in Amazon, what I thought was a dev server, it was a dev server to me, but it was a prod and very important EC2 instance to somebody else. I said, oh, well, this probably isn't needed, so I terminated it. Got all proud of myself that I was saving money. And then realized that they needed it, and I hadn't taken a snapshot. And again, to be fair, like if you don't set up snapshots, N2WS will actually crawl, if you will, all of your instances, and say, hey, here's a new instance. I'm going to back it up. Or if you put the correct tags in there, I mean, if you're tagging your instances, which is also a very good idea in AWS. Then we have it set to once an hour. It looks through all of our instances, and if the proper tag is in there, then it just adds it to the backup. Because again, there's no downside to having extra backups. I can always stop it tomorrow when it notifies me. So yeah, I mean, we were doing it manually, and obviously the good news is that it only really bit us one time. So.
All right. I think we have time for one more question. So this one is, are there costs involved with AWS data transfer fees between regions and accounts?
Oh, that's an excellent question. So when you move data between accounts for a cross-account backup, there are no charges whatsoever. You just pay for backup being stored in both accounts, but there is no transfer fee of any kind. Of course, when you are moving data between regions, doesn't matter if it's within the same account or if it's cross-account, then there are transfer fees, and they can vary between different regions and also depending on direction. For example, if I'm not mistaken, if you move data from Frankfurt to Sydney, that's 2 cents per gigabyte. But if you move it from Sydney to Frankfurt, that's 14. So when you plan your DR scenario, you should really pay attention to costs for transfer between regions.
Great, thank you so much. So we are almost at the top of the hour, and we certainly want to be respectful of everybody's time. So as we have mentioned, the webinar today was recorded, and we will make the recording in addition to the slides available for your convenience at the conclusion. And as we are so grateful to have had Mike Somerville from University of San Diego and SIIA member Vitaly Liakovsky from N2WS. For more information about N2WS, you can certainly visit their website. And again, thank you all for joining us today.